Hello, we are back for the 30th episode of Home Mat Advantage. I am Sam Herring, joined today by Jude Swisher, Mason Beckman, and our man Tony Rotundo. This is a special interview or episode where we have all the HMA team minus our fantasy guy Jacob Hoogley on the call, and I'm really excited for this episode. There's a lot going on right now, and so I'm excited to hear Tony's perspective and Mason's, and so this is gonna be a fun episode. So, Tony, Mason, Jude, how y'all doing?
I'm doing pretty all right. Sam, how are you?
I'm pretty good. Let's start off talking about like our last episode was our 1 year anniversary. Obviously, we're around that area of we're hitting 1 year. Tony, let's hear a little bit of your backstory of let's start with your wrestling backstory, where you started and how it's kind of evolved, and then a little bit of how you got involved with HMA.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on, you guys. It was never really my goal to be on the podcast by sponsoring you guys, but here we are. Crazy times. So thanks for having me on. But my backstory, in a nutshell, my dad was a coach. So very typical, like grew up, like, wrestling has always been part of my life, whether I wanted it to be or not. So he was pretty driven, and he really kind of started wrestling in our community. So, I was rolling around on wrestling mats when I was a really young kid, and just looking up to the high school kids, thinking they were just like the greatest thing. When he coached a high school team, so I was just, if you can remember when you're 5, you just think that like high school kids are just like old and mature and like the coolest thing ever.
Those were my siblings when I was 5. I had a bunch of older siblings like that.
Yeah, I remember being like near my dad during like dual meets and stuff like that, just being completely in awe and hearing like the strategy with 30 seconds to go. The kid's like, okay, I'm gonna hit a switch, and I'm just like, this is just nuts. Like just being involved with that. But so I started wrestling when I was 4 or 5, and wrestled through high school. Obviously, did really well. I kind of peaked when I was about 14, but I did freestyle, Greco, all of it. We started cutting weight a little too early. Like we were definitely, it was, this is the 70s. So I was born in 1967. I'm 53, so I'm a little bit old school. So I was in the era of like heavy weight cutting in high school and stuff. But I heard a podcast recently where I guess it was Barry Davis, where it was like Gable had him run before the NCAAs and then got him in a hot car. This is a true story. When I was 10 years old going to a kids tournament, I was in sweats in a hot car as we were driving to the tournament, like cutting weight and stuff like that. Yeah. So, I'm not necessarily proud of that. It was just what we did at the time. So cutting weight like that just takes its toll mentally. You just start to lose your edge. You just don't want to do it. And particularly if you have a dad who's like, always wanting to talk about it. Like we get home from a tournament and he would want to watch video. Like we had this old video camera that was huge. It came in a case. It had like 4 pieces to it. And he'd want to watch the video. And all we wanted to do was not talk about wrestling. And, also he'd say, hey, on a Sunday, he'd say, hey, there's this tournament on Saturday. Next Saturday, why don't you go check your weight? And immediately you just got hungry. You just wanted a sandwich or something. And it's a week before, and so like that mentally just messed with me. And so, but I stuck with it. I really didn't fully appreciate it until now, but I was around it. I've gone to every kind of tournament you can imagine. I competed in a lot of stuff. Before the Cadet Worlds, there were these like kind of gatherings, these cadet gatherings. So I competed in Missoula, Montana, and trained with a USA team for a week before that and competed. There was only one other competitor, but it was all like a precursor to the Cadet Worlds and stuff. I competed in Greco, but yeah, so I've been involved my whole life, and it's in my blood, absolutely. But I wanted to tell you, Sam, because it's funny. I grew up on a small farm, and you love this book, Carry Wood, Chop Water, Carry Wood? No,
Chop Wood, Carry Water. Yeah,
So,
I
like,
love
Chop
that
water,
part.
carry wood.
chop water, carry wood. Anyways, I grew up on a small farm, and we literally chopped wood every weekend. And my dad was cross training us, but we had a wood burning stove, and so like that idea of just hard work was totally ingrained in me. And
It
skipping forward,
transfers so well into our sport too. Like that attitude and mentality of just gritty hard work, like chopping wood and carrying water, is it transfers to wrestling so well. It's pretty cool.
absolutely. And it really does carry with you. Like, so recently somebody asked how I could just stay up and process photos and just churn through photos and get them up quickly and late nights and stuff like that. And I'm like, that is the same equivalent to chopping wood and carrying water. There's hard work ahead of you and you just have to do it. And if you want to be good, if you want to be good, get good, and stay good, you just have to do these hard things to keep you, at an elevated level. So for my photography, it's like just a lot of hard work. And so the wrestling, the growing up on a farm, the chopping wood, the carrying water, the watering the
Yeah,
animals at
yeah,
6 in
yeah.
all of that. So
So let's talk about that for a little bit. How you got into wrestling photography. Have you always had a passion for photography, or did that just come out of the blue?
in high school, my dad handed me a camera. He's a bit of a photographer. He's got some gear. He's taken some nice photos, but he wasn't like going out on the weekends, photographing. He used to carry a camera at wrestling tournaments, but he would rarely take pictures because he was very excitable, and so he would have the camera with him, but he would never really took a lot of pictures.
Mm-hmm.
So I inherited a camera, and so I kind of got into it, and I processed photos when I was in high school and in college. But I was never really, really like photography is what I want to do. I was focused on wrestling primarily, and so I wrestled through college, and then I coached for a couple of years around in upstate New York, kind of with my dad, like a freestyle team and stuff. And then I moved from Buffalo, and I had a 10-year gap where I didn't do anything with wrestling. And I honestly think it was the best thing for me. Like, I basically put the sport aside and didn't think about it. And this is through the time of like Dave Schultz and Mark Schultz and all of that stuff. And I would watch the Olympics, but I just was not involved in the sport. And I actually think it was really good because it rejuvenated me. So what happened was I moved from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, and I was working in Berkeley, and I would go to the gym every day and pass by Berkeley High School. And about 10 years later, so this is like 1997 or 98, I was like, oh, it's got to be around wrestling season, and I literally just dropped in on the gym at Berkeley High, and the coach was like, if you want to help, you can help. Like, do and he's like, you go officiate this match. And now I had been away from the sport. I didn't remember the rules. He's like, here's a whistle, go officiate, like just the kids, like a wrestle off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. So I wound up getting involved with that team and wound up coaching that team with my friend Brad for about 5 years. But
Mm-hmm.
I grew up on a pretty big wrestling team. My vision of what I wanted to be as a coach and being involved was different than like a very urban, setting where you had 6 kids and it just wasn't completely fulfilling. I mean, they were good kids, but you're babysitting the kids and there just aren't enough sparring partners. We barely had enough kids to roll up mats and stuff. So it wasn't really fulfilling, and I was ready to kind of move on to the next phase, but I didn't know what it was going to be. And I ran into this guy named John Sachs, who
Mm-hmm.
is out of Petaluma. And so North Coast is the section we're in. And it was the state qualifying tournament, and he was sitting next to us and shooting from the stands. And I said, what do you do? And he's like, well, I take pictures and I post them on the internet. And the internet, I work in tech, so like the internet was something I was familiar with and how to do websites and stuff. And just, it was an absolute light bulb. Like I heard him say those words and I was like, that's it. Like a notion of like love at first sight kind of thing where you just have this chill, like
Right.
that's what I'm going to do. Like there was no question that was exactly what I was going to do. Like it just in a heartbeat hit that like, that's what I'm going to focus on. So I had a little point and shoot camera. I went out and just got better gear. And I actually wound up coaching the next season because for various reasons, I was going to end it at that season, but I had to coach the next season. But I really just wanted to like photograph. And so I stayed in touch with him and bought a kind of not great camera. But, at the end of that season, actually, it was really interesting. None of our kids made it from the Friday to the Saturday that next season at the state qualifier. And on Friday I was a coach, and on Saturday I came in, and as a coach I was way too like in my head and too like like didn't really make a lot of friends because had this team that didn't get a lot of respect and all this stuff. Anyway, so on Friday I was a coach, and he said, "Yeah, why don't you come in and shoot on Saturday?" And on Saturday I was a photographer, and it happened that quickly overnight that
Wow.
I was yeah, and of course I was like the friendliest guy. I was just like saying hi to coaches and officials and stuff like that, and I took some pictures, and he saw them, and he knew right away that like there was some kind of talent there. So then, I bought better gear and I started shooting for him, and I would just give him my photos, which a lot of new young shooters do, and it just took off from there. So he was a mentor for sure. He did a lot of the things that I've done for you guys, which is how do I get a credential? Who's Gary Abbott at USA Wrestling? What are the ins and outs of how these things work? But the photography was something that I just was like, I kind of knew that I was pretty good at it pretty early on. So I just loved it. It's a little bit like golf. I don't know if you guys have ever golfed, but it's like you take a lot of bad swings, but then you hit a beautiful swing and it keeps you energized and back into it. So at
Not
first
me.
it's like, no, you just hit the ball
Just bad
hard.
swings.
Oh, just bad swings. Well, so with this early on, you're gonna take a lot of crappy shots, but then all of a sudden you get a shot, you get a great shot, and that's what happened. I started getting some good shots. I got on the cover of Win magazine. So I went to I went to Beast of the East. No, I went to the Ironman and Beast of the East like in 2006 or 2007, and I got a cover
Good year.
shot, and it was like right on. This feels good. Like so just shot a ton and have really not stopped. Just love it. I love it, and it's good to find a calling. I'd say it comes natural to me. Like that's what I tell people. I am just funneling the energy that's going on in the room. But yeah, it's good to be great at something, and I say that without ego. I don't mean to say that like
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
like you getting the praise, getting the feedback from the athletes, from other photographers and stuff. It feels really good to be like, yeah, this fits. This is what I want to do. This is my outlet.
Yeah. Hey, can
And
I interject super duper
yeah,
quick? I
totally.
think this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think one of the biggest problems with these kids that are growing up now, generation, is they're okay at just being mediocre at things. And I think, that it's important to have something that you're good at and something that you strive to be good at. And so that's really cool that, maybe wrestling didn't work out for you as well as, you would have hoped, but now you can go to photography and you can truly believe it's your calling.
Yeah, you're
There's
absolutely
just a lot of mediocrity. Bleh.
right.
It's all over the place, and people are okay with being okay. And so,
Yeah, it's just sometimes it's hard to find that thing that like really motivates you and stuff, and combining it with a love and a passion, and getting feedback. I do shout out to like all the high school coaches out there and junior high, middle school coaches. It is such hard work because the hard work, it's like any relationship, when people talk about hard work, it's getting yourself, like your spirit and like up for what could be a crappy practice because the kids are just
Mhm.
running around and being, doofuses, right? So like coming in the room and having that positive attitude and that upbeat attitude with, even if you're babysitting is so hard, and having a lesson plan and executing it and stuff, and knowing like how to treat individual kids and when to put the pressure on and when to let the pressure off them and stuff. It's a tremendous amount of work to build a successful program.
Shout out to Mason.
Yeah, man. Shout out to Mason.
Yeah, it's to speak to your point, man. One of the things that I was always told, like the saying I kind of stick to, is you be a thermostat, not a thermometer, right? If you're gonna be a coach, if you're gonna be a leader, you need to be a thermostat. So you have to have the ability somehow, some way, that when you step through the door, right, you have to leave everything at the door, and you gotta, like you said, bring energy and set the tone, which, especially with little kids, is hard to do, man. It's hard to do consistently, especially because it's weird too. Like, and I mean, as a club coach, we get kids from all different schools, right? So they don't see each other all day, and not the whole group. It's crazy because somehow, some way, there's a consistent energy throughout the group every day. Like somehow there's a consistent wavelength, and some nights are awesome. Everybody's locked in and they're good. And then there's other nights, man, where it's just like Coach A, Jim, the guy that runs the club, and I will sit there and look at each other and be like, they're just gone tonight. Like, I don't know what's happening. And those are the nights where, so to speak, like you make your money, right? You have to reel them in and you have to get them focused. And you gotta try to help kids get better, even though they have the attention for fish sometimes. So it's a wild ride.
Yeah.
So Tony, can you tell us about the first time your first ever experience with home mat advantage?
Yeah, I think that my experience, a number of people, particularly in the wrestling community, was with Sam announcing the Southern Scuffle, and I think that you know this is going to be an ego boost for both you guys, but you guys are special kids, if you would excuse the term, and I think that's immediately apparent. So I was like, this kid knows his stuff, and was like, oh, cool. When I heard you guys were doing a podcast, now Jude, I know you didn't know who I was, and I of course didn't know who you were, so it's a fair trade-off. But so it was Sam doing the Southern Scuffle that year for Flow 2 years ago, and then I don't listen to all the wrestling podcasts that come out. I just don't have the time. But I started listening to you guys, and it was absolutely clear that you guys are talented and smart, and you're not just making a podcast for other kids. You're making a podcast for adults, and you know what you're talking about. So I started listening to the podcast and was like, I thought at first, it's cute, right? So a couple kids. I was like, cute kids. And then it was like, oh wait, there's a lot of substance to this. Like, you guys know what you're talking about, and you bring a lot to it. So
which is funny because when Jude and I talk about it, we look back at like the first podcast and laugh at ourselves and like all the stuff we said and the way we spoke. We feel like we've improved so much, and the fact that you guys really actually did enjoy what we thought was absolutely terrible is kind of crazy.
Yeah, no, it's there's good substance to it, and the fact that it's coming from you guys don't have this lifelong. You're not so opinionated, and that you don't bring a lot of like curmudgeonliness to it all. It's a lot of positivity, is what I'm trying to say. So I appreciated that, and around the fourth episode, which I think is a particularly good episode. I think you guys called that out last week. I was walking and listening to it, and I was like, well, what can I do more to support you guys? And I certainly didn't go into it thinking like, 2 years down the road, like, oh, I'm going to be this, wrestling media mentor. And that's like, there was no notion of that. Like, I didn't pre-plan it at all. So the funny thing is, I heard your podcast last week and was a little embarrassed to hear my name that many times, but I was like, well, I didn't know what sponsorship was either, so it's pretty funny. Like, I didn't have this whole thing laid out and it formed or anything. It was sort of like, maybe what I can do is help you guys a little bit financially and maybe help you guys like get credentials and stuff, which is kind of what it's become. But it's become more of a friendship than anything with all of you guys. But yeah, so I I DM'd you, and I'm sorry to make you wait. I reread the email that I sent, and I didn't realize you guys would be kind of waiting for that. And I also reread the thing, and it's long. But
It is long.
It is
I do
long.
remember
it is
that.
long. But
I went back and reread it recently too.
I'll tell you why. So, I didn't want to come off as this creepy guy. So that was like, it was really important to me that your parents bought in. It was really important to me that I gave you guys some background that that I'm involved in the sport and that I was married and had a normal life. So I wanted to give you some background on that. And then also I didn't want to leave you hanging on like, well, what would a sponsorship look like? So it was a long email, but it needed to be, or I felt it needed to be,
Right.
because I kind of wanted to cover a number of things that we were putting on the table there. So yeah. So there you go. I mean, so, we talked and really, it's become a pretty fun mentorship for me. I was telling my wife the other day that, I'm not getting back to the high school coaching and stuff like that. I'm not great with kids. I don't walk up to just any kid and be like, hey, let me mentor you. I think that you guys are terribly special kids, and super smart. The homeschooling, I've bought in completely on homeschooling your folks. Credit to you guys and your folks. So you guys have kind of made it easy because you ask great questions, and also it's a topic that I'm particularly involved in, right? It's wrestling, and it's like how do you navigate these waters in wrestling media and in wrestling in general as a fan and as a media person.
Absolutely. And eventually, I think it was June, so it was a couple months after you first reached out to us. We met at Final X Rutgers.
Oh man.
And
I
I
was
think
probably shorter than Jude realized.
yeah, I think
was-
Jude thought we were both much shorter than he thought.
I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were surprised by me first of all when we were walking into the building being so short, and then you saw Tony.
Yeah,
Well,
totally.
it's just because you get an email from someone. I'm like, oh, I bet he's my height or higher because he's an adult. And when you're when you're a kid, you don't really look at adults as being tall or short or anything. You just look at them as being adults.
Yeah.
And so once you grow up, then you start realizing, oh wait, they come in different sizes too. And and so
Totally.
that was fun. It was fun.
Yeah. For those who don't know me, I'm 5'2" on a good day. So yeah, I'm pretty short. But I think one of the things, just a plug for short people, if you don't see yourself as short, other people won't see you as short. I just do not see it. I don't walk around all day going oh man. Sometimes I'll see pictures and be like, dang, but most of the time I just don't see myself as short at all. Big heart.
Big heart.
But
Yeah.
that was a fun day and event at Final X.
Yeah.
Tony and I were coming from pretty far, kind of, and we made it for the first session, so I got to talk to you a good bit there and get all set up and everything. And then Jude made it for the second, and that was just a blast. It was so fun.
Yeah, and you take a chance on people, right? It's like kind of recommending somebody for a job. So here I'm saying to Gary Abbott and folks hey, these kids are really good, but I don't know if you're gonna do something crazy, go run out of the mat or do something silly. So I was super proud of you guys for being completely professional, and you totally it's so funny that Mike Finn took a liking to you guys because he's very serious. He does his job extremely well, and I was that he's the type of person that I was thinking maybe he'll kind of question why is there a 12-year-old kid here, but man, you guys did such a good job and impressed everybody.
We did a really good job of being fanboys. That's what we did a good job of. I was like, it was, man, there's nothing like it though. Being at an event with press credentials, there's nothing like it.
And another thing is, that was my second event that I'd ever been to that wasn't my own competition. I'd been to the Scuffle, which was the time of my life, and then I went to Final X. And so my experience of going to like events that's not my own wrestling is completely different from Jude's, who has been going to Penn State duels since he was little. Like I started late and I started out with just having the time of my life every time I go to an event. And from there I went to Who's Number One at Carver Hawkeye Arena and commentated there. And so I've like my experience at tournaments and events has just been incredible for this last year and a half about.
Yeah, it's fun to see things through people's eyes, and so I could see the gleam in your eye. You just were on top of the world, and it was like I remember specifically we turned around and early on in the day, it's like Coleman Scott standing there. I'm like, oh hey Coleman, have you met Sam? And Sam's like, oh my god, it's Coleman Scott. And I'm like, let me take a picture.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's like just everywhere you turn, there's somebody famous that you want to meet and stuff. It's pretty cool. Bader.
Yeah, that was incredible. And all the people that, like, it wasn't just me looking around, oh, I know him, these guys are great, but they actually, like, took time to talk to me and introduce themselves, and it really opened my eyes to who was actually listening to my podcast. Like, at the time, I thought it was a few people on Twitter, and then my family and Jude's family, I was thinking was listening to the podcast, but when Coleman Scott was like, yeah, I know I listened to the podcast, and all the guys at Flow knew me, and it was a pretty cool experience, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, hey, let's if Sam, you don't have anything to say, I was gonna say we can transition the conversation to Mason and how he got involved in Home Advantage. And I know that there's a lot of things to go over, obviously, but we thought it would be good to kind of show everybody our group and who's all involved with Home Advantage. So, Mason, tell us, man, when did you first encounter Home Advantage?
Pretty similar to Tony, to be honest with you. I follow everything, obviously saw and heard Sam at the Scuffle commentate and everything, and like I spend way too much time on Twitter. So I kind of saw the start of it there with when you guys started putting things out with the podcasts and just with everything else. And then when I made the transition out of college coaching to move back to Pittsburgh and get back into club coaching in the corporate world, Tony reached out to me. The wrestling world's a small one. I don't have a clue where Tony and I would have first met or interacted, but it's been a while now. Probably
it was nationals. It was at NCAA's. I mean, I knew who you were. I photographed you when you were in high school, but it was NCAA's 4 years ago or something. I don't remember which one.
Yeah. So, again, the wrestling world's a small one. Tony and I had built a mutual respect and a friendship of sorts, just, again, through the love of wrestling, right? So Tony reached out to me and he was like, hey, man, I know you've done some media stuff before. If you're interested, I think these guys would be a perfect fit. And I just said, yeah, absolutely. I knew what you guys were doing. I was a big fan of it. I was following it. So, that's that.
It's pretty special. We've said it every podcast now since however many episodes, but we have, I believe, the greatest team in wrestling. We're all really good friends and we all can have conversations and be intelligent. But it's fun to do it. So, I appreciate you guys. It's really fun. And, if there's anything else that needs to be said, let's say it. And then let's get into some news and talk about some stuff in wrestling now.
Let's get into it.
Well, one real quick thing to your point,
okay,
Jude.
Yeah,
I think one of the things that I think makes us super unique is the variety of perspectives, right? So you have, Tony, you've been in the sport from the jump, right? Like you said, in different capacities as a competitor, and you've lived through different eras of the sport, right? And I mean, when you were a kid and everything, like think of the change in the production value of events from the time that you wrestled to now, right? It's amazing how much different it is. It's amazing from the time I was a kid, and I was born in the early 90s. So, Tony has lived through it, and you live your wrestling world through the lens for the most part, right? Mm-hmm. That's certainly how you're known and everything. So you live it through the lens. I was fortunate enough to compete through college and everything, coach at that level, and now I spend most of my time bouncing around as a coach and everything. And then you guys, obviously, Jude, you're in high school. Sam, you're in junior high. You guys are, literally, you guys are living the dream. It might not feel like it right now. It might not always feel like it, but it is. You guys are living the dream. So I think one of the things that makes us super unique, and I do, Jude, I'm a big fan and I'm a big believer in what you said. I think we've got the most complete team because we're all wrestling junkies in our own way, right? We're all in love with the sport. We come from very different backgrounds. Tony, even just geographically, we come from different backgrounds. We've taken different paths or are taking different paths through the sport. But we all are open-minded and provide something very unique. So to me, that's what makes HMA such a special, such a unique thing.
Definitely. And like you said, like the difference between all of our backgrounds and our knowledge too, like it's funny, FRL's been going through the past 10 years NCAA brackets, and they'll start talking about 2012 where you guys probably have a lot of knowledge of what happened, and they'll start saying names and I'm like, who in the world is that? And I can tell you everybody in the bracket and I can tell you stats about them in 2019, but 2017 I can't tell you very many people at all. So it's pretty funny how we have Tony, who knows probably a lot of stuff going back pretty far, and then Mason, less far, but still, you've been involved in the sport since early 90s, 2000s, and it just keeps getting closer and closer. And so I think that wide range of knowledge that we have definitely adds as well.
Absolutely. You guys are way more of the junkies than I am. I don't have time to keep up on all the nuances. I can't watch all the dual meets and stuff. My wife wouldn't let me, and I just don't have the time. But sometimes I feel bad because you guys will be talking about 8 people deep on a bracket or a seating, and I'm like, you lost. After Marinelli and Joseph, you lost me. No, Wick, I know him. He's Californian, but so you guys are ahead of me. And yeah, just for me, the photography this is a hobby. Like it's not my day job. I have a pretty demanding day job for Disney streaming, so like Disney Plus stuff and ESPN Plus. So yeah, I kudos to you guys because you there's a lot to follow. And I appreciate you guys doing it. I actually get a lot of my information through you guys, like listening to it and stuff. Yeah.
Dude, it's just because we're homeschooled. Hashtag homeschooled.
Totally.
Goals,
hey, Dyson Gould's doing a pretty good job. He's not homeschooled.
He does do a pretty good job.
There you go. He does.
He's another wrestling nut.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Where do you want to
go?
Let's
get on to it. So, I think the biggest thing to talk about real quick is, the IOC came out officially today that 2020 Olympics will be postponed. I believe for one more year. I think that is what I heard. Tony,
yeah,
please tell us your thoughts.
Well, what I read is they need to be completed by the summer of 2021. So it's not to say that it's going to happen in July and August, but that's probably what everybody's thinking, and it'll get pushed like a full year. But you could see the dates changing a little bit there. Right. I was resistant. I'm sure the IOC was super resistant to making that change. They kind of got their card played a little bit by the Canadian guy, in that they probably wanted to manage the message a little bit better than having to make a pretty rapid announcement. So I think some news got leaked that was what they were thinking of doing, was pushing a full year or at least pushing it not like 6 months. I can't see them doing that and holding it in the winter. But my reactions are both with the staff. I mean, the same staff that runs the Summer Olympics runs the Winter Olympics, and so now you'd be looking at a 6-month difference between the Summer Olympics and then the Winter Olympics, which are February 2022 in Beijing, no less. And I can't see them pushing all of Olympics now. A year, they're not going to do that. So these people are going to be under a lot of stress and trying to get them done, 2 Olympics done in 6 months. But from our perspective, all these questions, right? Where you're like, do the people who qualified can remain qualified? So this is in the U.S., right? So do all those qualifiers remain? Do we open up? How do we open up new room for new qualifiers who might be coming up through? That's a question. Lots of questions, and my mind goes to folks like Burrows. So Burrows, I think everybody kind of knew he was going to retire after the Olympics, right? So now is he looking at does he have to go to ranking series again? Does he have to go like a whole nother year cycle to get to the dream, right? And one assume he does, and so that doesn't bode well for someone who's starting to kind of maybe be on the. I mean, I don't want to say anything about Jordan, but you know what I mean, right? He's not getting younger, right? So
it's hard to stay at peaks for
totally.
a year. It's hard to stay on your game.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Jordan Burroughs can do it. If anyone can, he can.
Yep.
But like you said, he's been competing in every single Olympic and world. He's made every single team since like whatever. What year? What year was that? 2011. 11.
He made his first team in 2011.
Yeah. Because he won it at 12. He won
Olympics. Yeah.
I assume that the UWW is going to hold the, from the 2019 Worlds, they're going to keep those spots, the countries that have earned those spots, and then, we got the Pan American qualifiers done. It was the last event, that wrestling event before everything shut down. I'm gonna assume they're not gonna re-wrestle those like next year. But they still have to do Europe and Asia and Africa.
Zane Redford hopes they do.
There you go, right? And then the last chance there.
And Yanni and Jo and everybody else at that weight hopes they do.
Right. So
some questions coming out for me. One of the biggest one is, what does this mean for the 2021 UWW World Championships? What do they do moving forward?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. Oslo.
Can they get one in this year? Have they planned an Olympic year World Championships? Has UWW planned that?
No, somebody needs to step up and want to pay the money to do it. And since it's like it would be off, non-Olympic weights, there's not a lot there, I don't think, financially for somebody to step up, a country to step up and do it. But Sam, you bring up a great question. It would be basically 2 years without a World Championships, right? Because we skip this year and then the Olympics next year. That's a great question. I didn't even think of that.
And then I know another thing that's on top of everybody's minds is the Olympic red shirts that the NCAA athletes are taking.
Yep.
They've just had an off year for absolutely no reason. Do they get another shot at it if they want it? Like, I could see very, very few wrestlers will take it, even if they offer it, which I don't think they will. But
my take is going to see a lot of hybrid, the Snyder approach, right? When the Olympic year. So
that's got to be it.
Yeah. I think folks like Yanni will do a hybrid season, and he'll go to Italy in January, or whatever the case may be, and go fly and compete, in a freestyle event for a ranking series, and then come back and wrestle for Cornell, and
then what is this virus looking like? Like, could COVID last 18 months from now? What are we looking at with that? And these are the questions that just make everything so blurry. And I just hate to be an Olympic athlete at this time, to have to deal with all this. And like, Jordan Oliver was on Bader's FRL thing, and he was talking about just how mentally he is just draining him for everything that he's training for. His weight, like, I'm sure after the Olympics were postponed today, he had to have been like immediately relieved for his weight, and sad, like the emotions that he has for that. Like, it's so emotionally draining to have this process. I just couldn't imagine being an athlete in this time.
No, and I mean, the other thing too is like the cycle, the physical cycle that athletes at that level go through. So use somebody, somebody like, I think James Green's moving up this time, but if you get anybody that's at a catch weight normally that's moving down for the Olympic cycle, there's a lot that goes into that process of changing your body to
Right.
shrink your body to come down.
Maybe like a
So,
Cologne.
or like a
He wrestled in
Jakara,
Italy. Yeah, like Jakara
yeah,
Winchester too.
Jakara, Sarah Hildebrandt, anybody like that. You go through a lot to shrink your body, and obviously your body's not normally that small. So now when you're left with this open-ended situation, it's like, what do you do? What does your cycle look like, right? Because if you're going to do it the right way to change your body, I mean, to be honest with you, like, this is something I have a little bit of personal experience with, because I wrestled 33 and I would weigh in the low 60s in July and August. So, like, I would have to go through the process of changing my body every year, and it takes a while. Like, you don't feel normal for 6 months. So, I mean, again, for those athletes, like, you can't just stay down.
Right.
But, again, without a solid date, what do you do? What do you do with training cycles? What do you do? I mean, right now, how do you train?
Exactly.
It's just one of – I mean, it's literally something – I mean, you know, Tony, you're the oldest of us here, but I don't think any of us have ever seen anything like this or ever expected to.
No, I don't think there's been anything like this. And you're right. I mean, thinking about it, when would Hildebrandt's next competition be? I mean, it might not be till December.
Right. You don't know.
I mean, it's crazy. Like, to hold your weight for 9 months, like, it's insane.
Yeah.
Somebody though, like Forrest Molinari though, who's moving up, they have to be like, yeah, I got more time to make this transition. And maybe for Seth Gross, I think he could make the jump up. But then if he wants to take another year, if NCAA gives him another year, does that mean he goes to 41? Like, there are so many complications that go with all of this.
Yeah.
Well, and then you look at, like, the perspective of, you mentioned Burroughs, right? So, like, the Dake Burroughs dynamic. I mean, again, I'm never going to be one to necessarily bet against Burroughs, but father time is a real thing, right? That works in Dake's favor. David Taylor has more time to get fully healthy because, I mean, even though he looked as good as he did the last time he was on the mat, I still don't think he was fully healthy. There are so many dynamics. Jaden Cox has even, not that I think Jaden needs a whole lot of time to get big, but Jaden has even more time to build up to Snyder. Deeringer has more time to build up. Like, you go through the whole list of anybody that's building up, or if you get the dynamic of, and Dake Burroughs is the best one I could think of you get somebody that's, I mean, I don't want to call it the twilight of Burroughs' career because he's still so good, but in the timeline it is, right? That favors Dake. You know, it favors people that moved up. It favors people that are on the younger side. So it's such a unique situation.
Yeah.
You know, this all kind of goes back to what we were talked about at the beginning of the podcast, but is the, you know, chop wood, carry water, right? Wrestlers, it's ingrained in us, you know, to have to, you know, do hard things. And this coronavirus, this pandemic that we're dealing with right now, it's a very hard thing. No one's expected it. But, you know, I think if anyone can get, you know, stiffen their upper lip and power through it, it's going to be us wrestlers. And who knows how long it's going to take. But what I do know is that we are tough. You know, we're a tough breed of human beings, and that we can get through it. So.
And you guys mentioned chop wood, carry water. I don't know if you guys have read it, but the whole premise of that book is falling in love with the process of being great. And it really just talks about, instead of the reason that you do something is for the end result, make the reason that you do something because you truly have a passion for the process. And it's funny that you guys bring that up because that is exactly what the wrestlers have to do at this time. Like, when NCAAs got canceled, the NCAA athletes have to find a way to be content with that. And they have to find a way to accept that in their minds. My state tournament got canceled the day before weigh-ins, and I had to find a way to accept that and be content with it. And the way I had to do that was through understanding that what I love is the process and not the result. And so whether the state tournament happened, whether I won the state tournament and reached my goals or whatever that was, I had to understand that I had gotten the satisfaction and I was content with what I had. And so I think that's what the wrestlers have to be doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, 100%.
And stuff. Okay. Well, hey, do we want to, so we had the Pan-Am championships. They just happened. We want to do a quick little recap of what happened there.
Yeah, and Tony was up there. How was that, Tony? In Canada, was it? Like, I'm sure they had some serious lockdown quarantine situations there.
Well, it followed right behind us. Like, so it was in Ottawa, and it was over 2 weekends. It's a bit of a unique situation where they have the yearly Pan American Championships, which is a ranking event. They call it the Continental Championships. So that happened the first weekend, and so like Burroughs and Snyder wrestled in that. Whereas the Pan American Olympic qualifier was the second weekend in the exact same facility, which is really, very, very unique situation. It was weird. The first week, nobody was really taking it seriously. People were hugging and saying hello to each other and doing the European style, like kissing their cheeks and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, this is crazy. And would get kind of funny looks when I would try to like fist bump or elbow bump. By the second weekend, everybody was like, oh, wait, this is like, in the course of a week, it went from like, this is a big deal, this is no big deal, to like, oh, wait, this is really serious. They considered shutting it down and stopping it for the second weekend, but there were unfortunately, there weren't a lot of fans the first weekend, really. It's in Ottawa. Ottawa has a pretty strong wrestling community, but they just weren't drawing a lot of fans. So the idea, like, it wasn't like 1,000 people or 2,000 people in an arena. They had to say, sorry, you can't come watch. It was, maybe 150, 200 fans. So they just tried to keep things separate. So like there was one 2-mat warm-up facility that was really right next to the arena, and everybody was wrestling on that because there were a lot of like people so this is Pan America, so it's like all the Americas. So folks from Cuba and stuff, they were rolling on those mats every day because they didn't have anywhere else to work out. So on the first day of the second weekend, they basically kicked everybody out that wasn't competing that day. Because they wanted to keep the numbers down. So their version of the CDC kind of walked through and was like, okay, this room, there shouldn't be as many people. And so they tried to kind of separate folks as best they could. So it was a little trippy. And then I flew out on Monday, and they started closing Canada down like behind me. They were like, no more people like allowed into the country unless you're a Canadian citizen. So it was definitely eerie and weird, and the airport was really, there was like nobody in it and stuff.
Hey, real quick, can we talk about how bizarre it was that they were having people do fist bumps I know like David Taylor had to give Tora Blanca a fist bump, and just before they wrestle a match.
At youth tournaments, they've been having no shaking hand policy, so they can't shake the coach's, refs, or opponent's hand. And then they literally wrestle each other, like full body contact.
I asked GT about it. I asked David about it. I was like, what did you think? And he's like, I made a joke about it to the officials, and they did not find it as funny as I did.
Yeah.
But
I hate when that happens because you're trying to be nice to the official, and then they don't like it.
Not funny.
But anyway, how was the event, Tony?
The event was good. The like I was saying, the Pan American Championships, there was I overheard some discussion that maybe it shouldn't happen the Olympic cycle, like back to back with the qualifier. People were kind of suggesting that maybe that was too much because minus it being a ranking series event, it's a fair amount of fluff. You don't really need that competition, but it was entertaining. I mean, we did pretty well. Yeah, one interesting thing is that Yanni actually teched Destrabats, who was the guy from Argentina that wound up beating Zane the next weekend.
Oh, really?
Yanni wrestled and teched him.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah. That kid, we can talk about that guy in a minute. Burroughs and Franklin Gomez got super chippy. If you want to watch that, like legitimately,
saw that.
Gomez got pissed off. Burroughs came out swinging pretty hard. Gomez was doing a lot of finger grabbing and stuff, which I have photos of. But Burroughs is definitely aggressive in that match, and it was competitive, and they were definitely like John at the end of it.
I mean, it's interesting because the last time they wrestled, Gomez was winning with whatever 9 seconds left, and Jordan Burroughs came back, and when I saw the score, it was like, oh, Jordan wins whatever. It was like 9-2. I was like, oh, it must have not been that competitive, but I mean, it was competitive up until the very end.
It was a fist fight, man. Like, I think Jordan's what he does is sort of like, if you're gonna push me, if you're gonna beat me,
Right.
I'm gonna beat on you. And he, like, from literally the first seconds, he's like really cuffing very, very hard. And the officials tried to put a stop to it, but they were both kind of going at each other and stuff. Jordan was definitely getting dinged way more and warned way more than Gomez, though you see Gomez, like, he was right in there in the fight. So that was a pretty good match. One match, Torreblanca, who David wound up beating, is a Cuban guy. He's built like a brick house. He and Dinger had a good match, and Dinger was wrestling pretty well. I was telling Sam about this. It's worth going back because there are some of these matches where I don't know if the UWW ref was new or what the situation was, but basically it was tied with Dinger on criteria. It was tied 1-1. Dinger had criteria with like 45 seconds left in the match. And the official's looking up at the head judge, and he's like, stops the match, and he warns Dinger for fleeing, for like staying in there. And 9 seconds later, with 34 seconds, they put Dinger on the clock, which is like, come on, just literally just hand the match, like just stop the match right there and give it to Torreblanca. And I just don't understand sometimes the thinking there, because you really rarely see that. And when you do, like, to see, I think it was 9 seconds between when they warn him and when they like put him on the clock. And it's like, come on, like I've seen matches where the guy will run the entire match and never be put on the clock, So like in one of Gilman's matches against, I think it was the Cuban, the guy was running the whole time and they never got put on the clock. But that was, sorry, for the qualifier. But yeah, it's kind of a rough match to watch because Dinger couldn't score. And later I talked to David about that guy, Torreblanca, and he said if you score on him early, if you score on him, but you score on him early, you have a much better chance of winning that match, which is why David came really aggressive. If you need to score on him late, you're not going to get that done. And so that's exactly what happened to Alex, and it was a bit of a bummer. But yeah, it was a decent match to watch. So yeah, it was fun to shoot. The light was good. The photos came out pretty good. The warm-up area was naturally lit, so meaning they had like just a whole wall of open windows, and so we got some great like warm-up shots and behind-the-scenes stuff. Which I got to give a plug and a shout out to this kid. You guys are going to be a little jealous, but this 16-year-old girl came over and was like, my camera died, my lens won't come off, and it was a Nikon camera, and I was like, I'm sorry, I can't help you, like I can't get this lens off, I don't know what to do. And then about 5 minutes later, I'm like, I've got a spare camera, I don't love the camera. So I was like, hey, I went over to her, I was like, if you want to borrow this tomorrow, you can shoot. And she wound up shooting for both weekends for me, doing like behind the scenes stuff and getting great shots. Awesome. Her name is Layla. Yeah, she was awesome. Like, again, it reminded me of you guys, because it's like, one, I don't normally just hand a camera to a kid, though with her, I kind of took a chance. Two, the shots will be like all over the place, but it turns out she's super talented, like great photographer. Her mom is a photographer, it turns out. So, it reminded me of you guys, where it's just like, man, you just it just worked out great. Like I took a look at her shots the first night and I was like, oh, wow, like she's got a good eye. She's like talented. So we had fun, like she just, every morning she'd come in and grab the camera and go shoot. So it was good.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. I was like thinking like, how can we get her on the HMA team? And she's a good wrestler apparently. But I don't know
Is she
in what
Canadian?
ways it should be. Yeah, she's from Ottawa.
I think we
Yeah.
have an only American policy.
Ah,
I'm just kidding.
Sam certainly does.
Sam
Oh
is
yeah,
very pro
you know it.
USA.
Yeah. Well, I'll make introductions. You guys can at least meet her online.
So hey, real quick,
Yeah.
because I have to leave here pretty shortly.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what obviously we don't know what the plan is, but like what needs to be done for Team USA, heading into the next whenever the Olympics are going to be. What do we need to get done, and who is the best guy to do it?
Well, I think you're probably leading to 65. So just to jump super, super quick, I know you got to go. With that Olympic qualifier, we did fantastic. So the men's freestyle team qualified. We now have qualified 5 of 6 weights. So Gilman looked good. David looked great. Gwizdowski qualified. So 5 of our 6 weights are qualified. Jumping ahead, the women qualified the rest of the weights. So we've got 6 to 6. And the Greco team has 4 or 6 qualified. So everybody's spirits were up, especially the women and the men's freestyle. It was like everybody was just riding really high on that because particularly the women went 4 for 4. It was wonderful to see. It was a good day. But 65 kind of is our white whale in our country, right? We struggle there. If only just because the competition is really, really good. So for those who were living under a rock and don't know, Zayn in the semifinal match was against an Argentinian kid. Now, doing some research on him, he's actually been around a long time. Like if you go in, his last name is Destrobats. There are cadet videos of him from 2015 wrestling.
Really?
Joe Colon. Yeah, you can go. Micic wrestled him in 2015. He's not a newcomer. He's been around a long time. But Yanni teched him the weekend before. So I think that the confidence was pretty high that Zayn was going to be able to beat him. Zayn takes him down. He goes into a leg lace, overcommits on the leg lace, and gets caught on his back. The official was incredibly generous. So you know how in international, like you're on your back, like they just look up to one of the judges and they're like, it's over. They gave him a good 25 seconds, which is a long time to be on your back. He was fighting for his life. I mean, for me, like a lot of emotion flows through me when I'm shooting. Like I can't shut it off, right? So I'm not crying, but man, I was just like, every ounce of my energy was just please get off your back. Like I knew Zayn could be down by 8 and he'd come back and win against this kid. I knew that like if you can just get off your back, and early on when the person gets put on their back, there's like panic, but then you're like, okay, there's this fleeting moment, 5 maybe 3 seconds in that you're like almost out, and if the guy doesn't catch your arm or do something or catch something, you're gonna get out. And the guy settled in, and it was like, oh my God, like the entire country's, the U.S. is just like, please, Zayn, please get off your back. It's just hard. Wrestling is hard. It's a hard business, and you can get caught and you can make mistakes. And so he'll bounce back. He bounced back for 3rd, but it's a bummer. So the hard work there is to get that qualified.
Who do you think's the best candidate to get qualified? Tony and Mason.
Go ahead, Mason. Oh, you're on
Mason,
mute.
you there?
You might be muted.
Yeah, sorry. We got dogs in the house, so
no worries.
But no, so if they're at their absolute best, I would probably say Oliver. I'm biased. I've known Jordan since we were young, but when he's on, man, he's just so special. And Yanni is too, don't get me wrong. And so is Zayn. All of them are. And I'm splitting hairs here. But the thing with Jordan is offensively, he can score against elite guys in just so many ways. He can do things that are such a special combination of power, speed, and an extremely high wrestling IQ that he's been surrounded by incredible wrestling minds his whole life. So if gun to my head, I got to pick one at their absolute best, I'm taking Oliver.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think part of that is his risk factor is very, very low compared to a guy like Zane or Yanni. Obviously, we know Yanni puts himself in positions where he could really give up stuff, and Zane's pace is just so high, he's gonna lose points a lot. And a guy like Oliver is a little bit more seasoned. He's got a little bit more skill that can match the foreign wrestler styles. I think he is a great bet for a sure qualification. Now, I think Yanni's ceiling is probably the highest, and I think he's probably our best shot at Olympic gold, in my opinion. But I think Jordan Oliver is our best bet for qualifying the weight, if you understand that.
Now do you have to win last chance?
Yes,
I
I
think
so.
top two.
Top two? Oh,
Yeah.
that
Yeah, you gotta make
All right
finals.
then.
You gotta
that
make
makes it a
finals.
lot easier.
Just send them both.
Well,
We'll
if you
qualify
look at
both
the field,
spots.
if you look at the field, there's nothing easy about qualifying.
Because we know Jordan Oliver loves stealing spots.
Right.
Oh, man.
That'd be funny. Can you send multiple in a weight to last chance?
No.
No,
One-
you gotta send your rep.
Yeah.
So we have to have our Olympic team trials before last chance?
That's right.
Well, that's what they wanted the timing to be like that. Like, right. So that was a huge topic of discussion if everything got pushed, and because it was announced that the last chance is going to get pushed because the European and the African and Asian qualifiers were going to get pushed. So we were like, well, where do we fit in? And we would want and you need 2 weeks between the event, either before or after, for it to be fair. At least 2 weeks, So the talk was trying to get the OTTs done in May and then the last chance in June. But now who knows?
It's tough. I remember when Molinaro won the spot. I remember being like, "This is awesome. He's our Olympic. He's our rep. He's going to the Olympics." And Dad's like, "He's got to go to last chance." I was like, "This is dumb. Look at all the things he just did. Let him go." But I mean, he qualified the spot, so it was okay. All right. So, guys, I think that's where I have to leave. If you guys want to continue talking, feel free to. But I am going to have to leave the call right now. So, hey, thank you guys.
Right.
All right,
man.
see you, Jude.
Later, Jude.
All right, now it's 3. I don't really think there's too much more to talk about. We could finish up some Pan-Am thoughts if you have any more. But we're getting pretty close to wrapping it up here.
Yeah. No. Just I shout out to the Greco team did really well too to qualify 4 of 6 weights. They've got a little bit more work to do for their last chance, but you're happy to see those weights qualified and the 4 of the 6. So that's good because they were looking at 0 of 6 going into that
Wasn't
competition.
Max Nowry qualified though?
Non-Olympic weight. He won.
Man.
That was a non-Olympic weight. Yeah.
Oh man. So anyway, women did really well too. They qualified 6 out of 6. They finished it off, right?
Yeah, they did, and it's
That's
it
incredible.
would have been a disaster if they hadn't. I mean, Hildebrandt's really solid at 50. Winchester at 53 is just, oh my God, she's a monster. Helen looked very good. Shaking some rust off, but she looked really good. Miracle wrestled really well. So it was a really nice day for the USA that day. Everybody was running pretty high. It was fun to be there.
Do you think Helen is 2016 Helen or close to it?
That's hard to say. I don't think so, and I love Helen. She's awesome, but I think that given the state of her injuries, there's probably always forever going to be kind of a hesitancy and a reluctance and not wanting, and people are going to come at her and they're going to want to throw her on her head, can she get there? I think so. I saw Helen in 2016 at the Olympics like a week before, and I'll tell you, like, I've never seen another better example of Eye of the Tiger kind of thing, like the whole Rocky thing, where she's told the story. She was eating the exact same meal every meal. She was not talking to media. She wasn't talking to anybody. She would eat over in the corner. She would eat like chicken, like, boiled chicken and broccoli for every single meal. She was so focused, and I didn't really fully grasp it until the competition started. And she was so locked in. I mean, so unbelievably locked in that she could do it. She had the mental edge, and when she pinned Matson in the semis, it was like, wow, she really could do this. Now, is she there yet? I don't know. I mean, we haven't seen her against like really high level competition.
Well, Allie Reagan's a world silver medalist. She's a pretty good scale, in my opinion, of the world, and she is right there to win. So
yeah,
I think Helen, I mean, her ceiling is definitely really high, and we all know that.
She is. I mean, go watch the matches from this competition. Like, she's unbelievably good at making you think you've scored a takedown and then showing you haven't. Like, she gets into these positions that right at the last, like she's so sneaky. I mean, she's got a fantastic offense. She's got a lot in her repertoire. She's got a really nice fireman's. Like, she's got a lot of offensive firepower, but her defense is really, really good. Really good, really sneaky, really. And I talked to some of the girls after, some of the women who've wrestled her, and they're like, or Chun was like, yeah, she'll make you think that you've got a takedown, and then she'll spin out of it. I'll point it out to you guys after, like, what exactly I'm talking about. She's really sneaky. So, I mean, her acumen, like, to Sam's point, like, her ceiling is super high in terms of her wrestling ability. It's just the physicality is really, and it almost comes down to the brutal physicality, right? Like, how is she going to do in a just a brutal match? And I hope she does well. I'm a huge fan.
I think her, like, sneakiness, like you were talking about, and her savviness can be credited to Coach Valentin Kalika. He is such an amazing coach, and I know they've kind of split since 2016, but like, his technique and the wrestling that he's able to coach is incredible, and I think a lot of her style can be credited to that.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things with Helen that's so, and it goes right into what you're saying, Tony, with how sneaky she is, how good her defense is, especially like how good her dead to rights defense is, basically. When she's clicking, and this was Pan-Ams was the first time I saw this since 2017, because she won Worlds then too. When she's on, even remotely close, the fluidity of her wrestling it's art. It's unbelievable. It literally, like, I think I tweeted something like this. But watching her wrestle when she's on, it's like poetry in motion. There is no, like, things are so seamless. And to your point about the defense, like, she can go from dead to rights. I don't want to say weasel her way out of it, but kind of weasel her way out of it and transition right into an advantageous position as well, if not better than anybody I've ever watched. It's incredible. And I mean, Sam, I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm sure Valentin has a lot to do with that. I mean, she grew up going to the club at the University of Maryland when Coach Santoro and those guys were there, and I've heard them talk about it, like, from the time she was young. They're like, she's gonna be really good. So I think you kind of have a stars aligning situation with Helen, where she has grown. She grew up through the rise of American women's wrestling, and it's still happening, right? Like, this is going to be the best women's Olympic team we've ever had.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think so.
Which I think is awesome to see. Honestly, I think all three styles are on the upswing in America, which is awesome. Like, men's freestyle continues to get better and deeper, back to where it was, in the Schultz, Smith, Monday era of things. Greco, I think, is on the upswing. Like you said, we went from 0 to 4 weights qualified, and the women just continue to get better. Our women's team is getting to the point where they can legitimately compete with Japan. So it's awesome. It's exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely.
do we have to
Go
go?
ahead,
Sam?
Tony. Go ahead.
Just back to Helen real quick. So she's committed to, John Morrison I assume she's at OK State, Oklahoma State, if that's like where she's training, but Morrison is her coach now, and they really
John's in DC.
Oh, okay. Oh, so he went to, I see. So
So John actually was in DC. He moved out there when I was still coaching at George Mason.
Got it. So you think she's training in like Maryland? Where is she training? Do you know?
I don't have a good answer to that, to be honest with you.
I feel like she's been all over the place, really.
But I think she's committed to John. It's interesting, so like a lot, like he's the sole person in her corner. I mean, you always have a second coach, whether it's Terry or whomever. Maybe it was Chun, I guess. But they were really locked in, like, they were really focused, and so I think that's a good thing. I think that speaks to her just being really keeping her focus and stuff like that, not having a lot of different voices. I think is probably something that she likes,
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to her. She was on the Bader FRL thing this morning, and I didn't get to listen to the whole thing, but listening to her talk about her return, like she really thought she was done, and her career was over. And the week before she wrestled Allie Reagan, she rolled her ankle in a high school, like she was wrestling a high schooler to practice, like a live match and she brought in a ref and put on the singlet and everything to simulate it, to get all her nerves and everything back again so she could feel it. And she got demolished by a high school girl, and rolled her ankle in the match and couldn't walk until that Monday or Tuesday.
Wow.
And that was the week before she beat Allie Reagan. And that blew my mind. Like, she made that big of a jump, and obviously that's all mental.
Yeah.
You can't make that much of a physical jump in 4 days. So she made a jump from losing to a high school girl to beating world silver medalist Allie Reagan, and then pinning Jenna Burkett twice.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy that she could do that.
That's crazy. Yep. Power of the mind.
Absolutely. And well, Olympics have been postponed. Olympic trials have been postponed. Hopefully we get Olympic trials soon to give us just some wrestling adrenaline and everything again. So hopefully we don't have to wait too long. But I mean, the power of this virus is pretty big. So you know what? I value health first, and then we'll talk entertainment. But
yeah, that is an interesting question. Canada does their OTT in December, the December before the Olympics. I'm very curious to see if maybe USA Wrestling decides to bump it up. I think they want to hold it after NCAA's because of the qualifier there and stuff like that. But so I doubt they'll do that. But I'm actually a fan of running Olympic team trials before the senior level competitions. And
I would love that.
Yeah.
I'm sure the athletes would too.
Well, you can tell
they-
what countries do that, because the athletes who have, like, if you qualify the weight at this like Pan-Am qualifier, you're going to the Olympics,
Right.
versus somebody from your country is going to the Olympics. So yeah, you can kind of tell the athletes that have already qualified most of the time, because their celebration is like twice as enthusiastic.
That is funny. I didn't really think about that, but I'm sure that's how it goes. But anyway, thanks so much for coming on, guys. I'm really glad we got to do this, and hopefully we can do another one coming up here soon. Possibly tomorrow is what we're looking at. Talk NCAA what ifs. And then I know Jude's got Joey McKenna, and who else does he have? He has Bryce Meredith coming on this week. And let's see, I think I'm gonna do a show, not really a podcast, more of like a video thing on Iowa wrestling from 2016 to 2020, like all-star team with Ryan Warner and Dyson Gould tomorrow. So HMA's got some content pumping this week. We're all bored in quarantine, so.
And you dropped one today, right?
Right, we dropped an interview with Jordan Cutler. Mason did an awesome job there. So, yeah, and we got that new fancy graphic my friend from church made. We're putting them on the front of the videos and stuff. So, happy to do all that. And yeah, hopefully we'll get more content at y'all. It'll be
Nice.
fun.
Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you all.
Sounds good. Thanks, fellas.
All right. See ya.